Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the Evening Standard Stories Festival in association with Netflix, and in particular to this conversation, Pride. My name's Julia Wheeler, and it's my huge pleasure to welcome one of the UK's best loved pop stars to this festival. Will Young shot to fame in 2002 with his victory in the world's very first pop idol contest. Since then, he's sold 10 million records, won 2 Brit Awards, and 4 of his 7 albums have made it to #1 in the UK charts. He's an actor, a DJ, and now an author. In his book, To Be a Gay Man, Will tells the story of the impact gay shame has had on his life and how he deals with it. He makes the case for us all to celebrate each other's differences. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Will Young.
I like being called a DJ.
Do you?
Yeah. It's quite old-fashioned, it feels.
What would you call it now?
No, DJ.
Still do
I like
DJ.
it, yeah. But I've got a sort of image of me like in a disco van, going around the home counties. Doing that. Actually, I just sit there and press buttons. I know how to drive the desk now.
Do you?
Yeah, they call it driving the desk. You've got all these things in front of you. It saves them money if I do it, so now I have to learn how to do it. Yeah.
They'll have you driving the van next, Will.
I've actually got a mobile disco. Anyway, that's another story.
We'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But okay, I want to take you away from the mobile disco van and take you to the height of pop idol.
Oh, yeah.
Talk us through actually the lead up to that, the pressure and the excitement in 2002.
Oh gosh, the lead up to it. Well, the pressure, I suppose, was. I mean, yes, it was there. But I was doing something that I absolutely loved. So, new talent competition started around this time of year, actually. It is 20 years, actually. And went over Christmas and finished February the 11th, I think it was. And it just built and built. They hadn't had a competition looking for one singer where the people voted. So it started off with 600,000 viewers and ended up with 16 million. And they probably lied. It probably wasn't that many. But anyway. And they went, it's 10,000 people. 10,000 people applied. I think it was only 3,000. Anyway. And I did get a real sense of how it was getting a lot bigger because, I started getting recognised with the other contestants. Radio shows started bringing our mobiles while we were in taxis. It was crazy. We were debated on the floor of Parliament. It was just, and then it culminated in these battle buses, where it was myself and Gareth Gates, and we went round and like politicians. It was such a genius PR. I mean, whoever came up with that, genius. And by the time it got to the final, I just wanted it to be over. I was just quite pleased that it was all over. I was tired, but I didn't feel much pressure. It was just wonderful to sing on a microphone. Because there's no way that I would have got a record deal. I was a politics student, middle class, gay, openly gay, and quite boring. So, it wasn't very cool. So me walking in to a record, and I worked at a record company. I worked at Sony Publishing. So I knew the deal. And I didn't play an instrument well enough to write my own songs. So I walked in and went, oh, hello, I'm Will.
My name's Will.
I went to Wellington College, and, it just wasn't going to, and I studied politics. It wasn't going to happen. But what was amazing about it is that it was ultimate democracy. It took it to the people. So the people in the upper echelons of the record business didn't have a say in it. The people did, and every person did.
And what was it that the people saw in you, do you think?
I think I was and am a really, really good singer. No, I am. And I don't mean that. I don't mean that arrogantly. I'm really good, and it's so. And I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. So, and I think people like that, and perhaps I've represented something different to the kind of pop singers, because at that time lots of people in pop, people would just mime. Everyone mimed, everyone. And so actually what that show did was kind of like bring singers, on primetime Saturday evening TV, who none of them mind. And I think people appreciated that. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe I was a bit different, I was quite honest. But I think it was about the singing.
And did you, at that stage, you were 22 years old, did you know how good you were then? Did you have a self-belief?
Yeah, I did actually, even though I was very insecure in other areas. But it's a weird juxtaposition, I think, for many artists, and for all of us actually, because we're all made up of different parts, and we're not allowed to see that enough actually in our lives. We can be, the best, most sort of firm, appropriate disciplinarian as a mother, but might just come to pieces when we have to go for dinner with our own mother. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm a brilliant mother, but as a daughter, I'm triggered. So, we're all made up of different parts. For some reason, I had a premonition that I would win a talent show. Out and out premonition.
Tell us about that.
Well, I just knew I was going to win it. So I posted the letter and said to my friend Adam, who's a very successful actor now, I'm going to win it. But it wasn't arrogance, I just knew it. And so throughout the entire show, I always knew I was going to win.
Do you think we'd call that manifestation now?
Yes, possibly. I've had quite precise premonitions. I mean, I had a premonition I would do a film based in the 1940s with Judi Dench. And I wrote it down, and I did. It was really odd. And that I would do a Noel Coward play. And I did that. So, and then they stopped the premonitions. It's a bit annoying.
Maybe they'll come back.
Yeah, maybe. I think that we can all be in touch. There's signs. We know we're on the right path when there's signs. Like, for example, let's say you're thinking of a song and then it comes on the radio, or you think of someone and they call. For me, those are just signs from the universe. People believe in God, a God, gods, just saying, yeah, you're on the right track. But no, I did have a real belief in my singing from a very young age, from about the age of 5. I just always knew I'd be a pop star. Very kind of beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I won, thinking, oh wow, I can be on my deathbed and go, I did my dream job. That's a real privilege. Not many people get to have that. And I was very conscious of that, yeah.
Let's take you right back. You talk about bit of 5 or 6.
I'll tell you something very quickly, though.
Go on, yes.
When I won, the first thing, apparently, I said to my friend, because all my friends from uni would come. I just finished uni, so I'd sneak them all in afterwards. You're only allowed 2 guests, about 20 of them. And apparently the first thing I said to her was not like, oh my God, I've got my dream, I've got a record contract. I said, think of all the free parties we can go to.
I bet they loved you.
We did, we went to so many. Yeah. I mean, what a vacuous thing to say.
Well, no, because at 22, that's what you want.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I know. Free booze.
Yeah, I mean,
free
it doesn't
food.
get much better.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway.
No. So, let's take you back. You say in the book that you first had a sense of the idea of gay shame when you were about 6.
Yes. Well, the idea of, being different. Yes, I wouldn't have known, obviously I wouldn't have known of the word shame or that kind of, but certainly the idea of a sense of difference. So it was really interesting looking back, because in the book I forensically go through my life from like day dot, and it was in a really geeky way. I was fascinated by it, and I remember really fancying Bobby Ewing. Was he Dynasty or Dallas? I
Dallas.
Remember.
Dallas,
Yeah. I think I said Dallas in the book, or it got corrected. And it's quite interesting because I wasn't sexual. It made me realise that being gay is not. People are so hung up with the sexual side of it. But it wasn't sexual. It was just like I had a real crush on Bobby Ewing. As a 6-year-old, and
It was probably that shower scene.
I think it might have been. Yeah, but then no, it wasn't quite sexual. But not just that. Like my mum's jewellery, I loved. I remember stealing one of her rings, you know, and then she said, you know, you've got it, haven't you? I was like, "You don't have it." I did have it. You know, and fascinated by how my mum looked and her smell, and why was I fascinated by certain types of women, you know, that were very flamboyant, and you know, I was interested in fashion from a young age. You know, all these kind of sensibilities, they're sensibilities. That's what they are. They're not, you know. So from writing the book, I realised very early on, I was answering my own questions, which was, well, what is there to being gay? And as I was looking from the beginning, I was like, there's a lot more to being gay than just fancying the opposite sex, or even who you choose to love. It can be a much bigger thing. Yeah, but I did feel different, and I did feel wrong. Yeah, fundamentally wrong. You know, and that grew. Then going to school, you know, looking at Sodom and Gomorrah and divinity classes, and the men are turned to pillars of salt because of women, because they're sleeping with the same sex, and you know, that goes into one's psyche, and it creates a soul wounding. And there's a John Bradshaw who writes about shame, the Don on shame, and he calls it soul wounding. And I think that's a very good, painful, evocative description.
And when you start noticing things like that, you actually see that it just pervades society, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because there was no, you know, it was in film, it was in, well, I mean, homophobia was rife and very public when I was young. You know, you had very few people that might be on TV, and you know, maybe someone like Julian Clary, you know, and he'd be described as, oh, I'm not going to use the words, but these words were just regular, de rigueur, you know, on morning TV, you know, get this off, you know, what's he doing there? And of course it was in the playground, but then there was and also, you know, it was funny because I think I write about it in the book. I remember like the sort of the friends of my parents, or it would be like, oh yeah, their brother, he doesn't have a girlfriend, you know, I think he's probably one of them, you know, and that would be the conversation. And people who were gay would seem to me as really desperate, lonely, sad people, you know. Never had a partner, or the partner wasn't spoken about. But then AIDS and HIV came along, and I remember those adverts. I didn't actually remember. I didn't remember. I remember them until I was writing the book.
Well, when you go back and look at them now,
They're terrifying. This is when we should have showed it, actually, because, you know, showed the adverts, because they were terrifying. They were tombstones. If you don't remember them, or you know, too young. God damn it. You know, but they were terrifying.
Yeah.
And it was called a gay plague, and you know, so the narrative that was forming for me was, well, I'm different. I'm sad and lonely. I'm gonna be alone. I'm gonna die, because I just thought I was gonna die. That literally was in my head. I thought I was gonna die because I was gay. Didn't know anything about AIDS and HIV. I just thought, well, that's another thing. And I thought I was, you know, going to hell because of Bible classes. So it's a sort of quite a grim compost that's building up, you know. The base is not a good base.
Let's talk about AIDS and HIV, because it struck me that you're reading your book at this time when, you know, we have a health emergency and a pandemic. The difference in the way that government and the health service didn't really deal with HIV and AIDS compared to now is just so striking, isn't it?
They didn't put up any money in the UK until the first heterosexual couple died of HIV and AIDS. But, you know, there were counsellors saying we should round up all gay people and you know, effectively put them in prisoner camps. I mean, you know, seriously, these things were said. And it was then used as a tool. Well, gay people have bought it on themselves anyway, you know, So everyone from far right religious groups could say, well, this is God getting them back, to just everyday people just going, there are accounts of people who would go into their local pub that they'd been going into for however many years, and then just because they were gay, they weren't allowed to use the cutlery when they ordered their burger, all the glassware. And this was real. This was happening. So it sort of stoked the fire then for a Thatcher government a few years later, but actually no, not that many years later at all.
Yeah,
Same,
yeah.
To go back to family values is what she spoke of, I think, was saying, or something like that. It was basically, a way to deride gay people.
And Section 28 as well.
Well, then Section 28 that people forget, which was where you couldn't talk about being gay in schools. And it wasn't lifted. What was lifted? A lot. We think these things happened so long ago, but they didn't. But AIDS these people were ignored and left to their own devices, basically left to die, and the same as in America.
Let's talk about school life, because you were at boarding school. Sports day was always a bit grim, wasn't it?
What happened at sports day?
Well, you just talk about actually how for a gay boy, sports day when...
Yes. Well, I write about sports day. Not actually, I don't know necessarily for me, but I was saying how, it's about parents taking ownership. So imagine a sports day, I still think one of the worst things that potentially can happen to a parent is the idea that maybe little Johnny or little Sophie is actually gay. So let's say, I'm not going to talk it up, but, Sophie, who's aged 9, seems to be very good at throwing the hammer. And I don't know if they throw a hammer at that age, but anyway, the idea being, or that Johnny can't run for toffee, but he's really good at drama. The idea, I know, and you're laughing, but what's interesting is what can be behind that is, oh, you've got a gay one, haven't you? And I don't think that that's gone. And I don't think, in fact, there are friends of mine, I've never said to them, because we'd never be friends again, but if I really called them out on it, they'd be ashamed if their kids were gay. Ashamed might be too strong a word. They'd be worried about what other parents thought. And there is still a thing about, the most amount of homophobia that happens is against straight young boys, young men, because the messages to them is, oh, you don't want to be, too good at amateur dramatics. You don't want to be. So they grow up thinking, well, being gay is awful, and it fucks them up majorly. That's why men are can be so fucked up, because it just fucks them up. But really, I use Sports Day as an example of let's get really real. Let's get really real. Let's get out of our nice bubble of maybe living in London or living in a certain borough where it's fine, and see what parents are really thinking. And one of the biggest shames that can come onto parents is still the idea that their son or daughter is gay, without a doubt, 100%. So it's starting so young, but it's the parents. The parents aren't dealing with their shit. The parents don't own their shit about their own terror and panic about what Mrs. Miggins is going to think, or what the Joneses are thinking, or the fact that they've never resolved their own frigging sense of sexual identity. It's not the kids.
Yeah. How were your parents with you in terms of support?
Well, they were disappointing, given that they are such rebels. I mean, they are insane. And I shared with you, didn't I? But I've just done a few small shows, and the audience could send in questions to my iPad, and live. And so I'm in Cardiff. I just want to bear, and also my parents are in Cornwall. First question, Annabelle Young, my mother. She's in Cornwall. Darling, what are we going to do about your father? He's been using the wax for the Dachshunds on his chap lips. So that's my family. You know, my mum's just got her 6th tattoo and she drives a Japanese sports car. So
What are her tattoos?
Oh, I can't even tell you. They're probably all inappropriate. But I don't. Swallows, butterflies, and hellebores. I know. It's just sort of like some sort of awful manga character mixed with someone from Gardener's World. But so they're amazing. They're amazing. They're very, you know, they collect erotic art. All we talk about are fast cars, money, and sex at home. Maybe
And the
not.
Archers.
Oh, well, the Archers is a whole different ball game, but I think my mum's just been kicked off the forum for it. I don't know what's gone on there. I can't talk about it. But sentence pending. But you know, they were disappointing because they were so open. You know, and I think the big thing for them was they were really worried about me. You know, and I do remember my mum saying, you know, one of the first things she said is, "You're going to get beaten up." And I said, "That's not the most useful thing to hear at this precise moment." You know, but that's where she went. Or another friend of mine, mum, she went, "You're going to die alone." You know, again, not the most useful thing to say. But I think they didn't. Oh dear, the phone's.
You're in
oh
trouble.
dear. You're not going to answer it. I'm in a talk. I'm so pleased that happened to you and not me, actually. It's normally me that leaves my phone on. No, I think their references were maybe not as, of gay people, were not as cool as them, actually. So they were terrified. They AIDS, and they thought I was going to get beaten up. And people were being beaten up.
Yeah.
You know, and killed.
Yeah.
So.
And in terms of, I mean, there just weren't role models. And if you looked at the telly, it was the Larry Graysons, it was the Frankie Howards.
Yeah, who were so repressed. You know, they were the repressed, you know, effectively still living with their mum. You know, Kenneth Williams, you know, we never talk about it. You're allowed to be camp if you're making people laugh. You know, that's one of the key things. We'll let them get on if they're making us laugh because you're allowed to be camp on the stage, but we don't want to hear about it. So I think and also I think my dad probably had to face his own prejudice, maybe things that he'd said in the past. You know, that's difficult for people. It's difficult. You know, I remember being at university and walking past, I think I say it in the book, and one of my friends, you know, it was when there'd been the nail bombing at the Admiral Duncan pub, I think it was in Old Compton Street, Soho. And, you know, this was a bomb that, you know, did horrific damage to people, you know, ripping out eyes, you know, lacerating people's faces. And I heard this group of friends saying, well, they all deserved it anyway. And I wasn't out then. But, you know, that was the context of the world that I was living in. And that wasn't just the context of those particular people. You know, I don't even know if they remembered they'd said it. They probably did somewhere when I then did come out a few months later. But you were allowed to say those kind of things. And then it continued when I, you know, was then a pop star and was publicly gay. People were allowed to say whatever they wanted. There was no challenge to it.
But you say in the book that at university, actually, you were also conscious of sometimes gay shaming other people.
Oh yeah, I hated the local gays. Absolutely. I mean, it was only gay in the village sort of thing. I couldn't bear them. There was an LGBT, it would have been then, society. They might not have been called that. But I remember there was someone. I was so jealous of him. He was called Freddie, and he wore buffalo trainers. Remember buffalo trainers? And he was so like open and I was so not open. But I, inwardly, like, hated him. Yeah.
But and had that? I mean, that's just being steeped in the culture, or
I
a
think it was
defence
just
mechanism. Or
well, I think they were, you know, well, in part, don't be open, because that's the thing. If you're going to be open, you're going to bring, you know, you're open to just keep it quiet, because if you're keeping it quiet, you're no threat to particularly men, and if you're not threatening men, and this is because we live in a patriarchy, then you'll be all right. But if you are, you know, showing confidence, you're going to potentially threaten me. You know, I'm in trouble then. So there is a sort of valid point to that in terms of as a gay person thinking. And I think I talk about a journey on a train when there were some guys and they were being very sort of loud, and my gay shame was, shut up, just shut up, you know. They annoyed the hell out of me. But it was internal gay shame, but also keep it down. Don't get noticed, because, you know, we don't get noticed. But I do think I was very envious, and internalized homophobia for people who are gay is very common. You know, and it's sad because it's so interesting. The white male sort of imposition of gay shame doesn't just tear individuals apart, it then manifests and can tear a community apart, you know, because of the internalized homophobia. So you really, all communities should be finding solace and connection, but it can be very difficult for gay men to find connection. I hope it's better now, because this has all been imposed, you know. So it's a really interesting, nuanced subject.
Yeah, there's no black and white to get.
There's no black and white, no.
So tell us about the time that you I know you don't like the phrase coming out, and we'll perhaps get on to that in a second, but the person that you first told, and the trust that was needed to do that.
I told my friend when I was 16, I think. And he was quite religious, but he was religious in a sort of like New Age Christian way. I think he went to Holy Trinity Brompton, which is a big church in London. So I think I felt safe because I didn't think he was going to, you know, damn me to hell. But also was a good person and would be trustworthy. And I remember telling him, and he was worried that I was going to say I had cancer, but no, I was like, oh, I'm gay. And I remember sweating really badly, and we had Celine Dion on repeat.
Which one?
Think Twice, that single. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Someone's, yes. We have a fan in the audience. Do you remember the video, the chainsaw? Someone with a chainsaw making a beautiful ice sculpture. How did that work?
They were the days.
Those were the days. Yes, I told him, and he was really sweet. And then I think it was also, well, let's see if I can date girls. So then he took myself and my brother and him. We went up to his then girlfriend's house. It was probably still to this day one of the dullest evenings I've ever had in my life. We watched love scenes. It was all the love scenes from Neighbours. It was a video. It was an actual video, and I remember thinking, kill me now. Absolutely kill me now. Not only knowing, even at that age, you know, because with Andy, like with his girlfriend, going, go on, you know, say hello to the girls. I was thinking, one, I don't want to. Two, why we're watching Neighbours love scenes. And I ended up just sitting in the basket in the kitchen with the family Dalmatian.
Aww.
It was really sweet. I had a great time. Yeah, and rang my dad and said, please come and pick us up. This is the most dull evening I've ever spent. And he went, oh, Christ, it sounds awful. Come and pick you up. Yeah, so that was a bit of a failure.
So let's go back to Pop Idol. So 6 years on, you told, I believe, the producers that you were gay when you got down to the final 10. Is that right?
Yes, because we had to go all meet in the PR people that were looking after the show. It was a place called Henry's House, and we all had to sit and sort of say if you've got anything, you know, that
we
needs
need to know about.
We need to know about it. So it was like me, and there was another contestant called Corbin, real name Chris Niblett. It's good pop trivia, and we were both gay. So I said, well, that's the deal. They were like, fine, no problem.
Yeah. So their reaction was
fine. Until we sort of then suddenly a few more PR people sort of descended as the show got more successful. And I think we had a week when it was a press conference was one of the challenges, and then people started getting very excited about that, and I said, they were trying to persuade me to, if someone asked me if I was gay, because I was openly gay anyway at university, people would have known. The suggestion was that I said I wasn't, and I got very cross with them, I felt a bit sorry for them, actually. I think they got a bit more than they bargained for, because they were used to working with, like, S Club 7 and, people just doing what they were told, and I wasn't going to do that.
No.
But also because it was very difficult to come out. It took me much longer than I wanted, so I wasn't going to then pretend, I wasn't who I was. That was just ridiculous.
And you use a beautiful metaphor in the book about there being 3 stages of caterpillar, cocoon, and butterfly, which I love.
Yes, that's it. Oh, God, I can't remember it now.
That is it. That's it, really.
Oh, well, that is it, isn't it? Well, there are 3 stages because you can realise it. You have to realise it in yourself first. You then come out, but then it doesn't mean that you've accepted it. Yeah. And I hadn't accepted it, and that's very classic gay shame. There's a huge backlog of years of feeling dreadful. So it's why I'm talking sort of slightly painting by numbers, but someone will come out and they'll go, everything's fine now, and then they'll go into a, let's say, heavy party scene and go straight into then becoming an addict, because they haven't dealt with the backlog of all the shame. It's gay shame's, has destroyed so many people's lives and continues to. But it's difficult because people don't want to naturally, no one walks into the fire, do they? People don't want to naturally go towards difficult feelings. But I think now it is a lot better. It's why I wanted to write the book, because I only knew of one book on gay shame. It's called The Velvet Rage. It's very good, but he's a bit irritating to me. Never said that before. I found him a bit irritating because he's a therapist, and I want to hear of someone's. I don't want to hear about someone's clients. I want to hear from first hand. So that's why even though I did get a lot from it, I also found the tone quite irritating. And that's why I wanted to write a book when it was just from first-hand experience. It's only my first-hand experience, it doesn't mean I'm right in my life, because it's my life, but I'm not trying to put it onto other people, but maybe people might find some similarity or resonance in places.
Well, often something that is so personal actually has a universality to it, doesn't it?
I think so. Yeah, because exactly.
What I mean is that there are. I'm a woman. I'm a heterosexual, but there are things in there. I thought, there's the shame there that that it comes through.
Yes, there are universal themes that we all experience. Yeah. Just even if we're from very different sides of the tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny story about?
Please do.
On the bus where we had these battle buses, and there were these people called the 3 a.m. girls, who I thought, and I really did, honestly, I thought they were prostitutes. But they weren't. They were like gossip column girls. I was like, why are the 3 a.m. girls coming to interview me? I just thought it was like colloquialism, but no, apparently they were. I never read this paper, so I didn't know. And they were going to ask the question. It was the last week. And they were going to ask the question, are you gay? And there was a whole big hoo-ha about it. And this and I was at one end of this double-decker bus, and it was sort of a whole lounge, very lush and plush, and the sort of, even though the curtains were shut for this woman to interview me, the PR lady cat, sort of like a meerkat, was sort of, I could sense her, just ears pricked, waiting, poised to attack. And as the woman asked the question, before she even finished the word gay, like I was sort of marched out of there, but as it like a president under an assassination attempt. Suddenly there was like 5 PR people, all with seem to wear suede Federer hats. I don't know why, and boots. Get him out! Get him out! Get him out! You know, and I was sort of marched out of the bus.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't moving. But it was all taken very seriously.
Yeah, and also just adds to that feeling that you already had. So,
It's like, what the hell's going on?
so they, I believe, set up an interview with a broadsheet in which you were going to talk, but then that
Yes.
got scooped, didn't it?
It got gazumped. Yeah. So I was going to go with a broadsheet, but then I think it's Sunday. Well, I know the Sunday Mail were going to then run a story, which I actually don't think legally even then you were allowed to do. I don't think you were allowed to say someone was gay because of the risk of security at that time. So I think I'm right in saying that. But anyway, and so then we went endless calls with this litigation lawyer, who I was convinced was part of the Territorial Army because he always seemed to be up a hill. But he also turned up at like Buckingham Palace and everywhere. I mean, he just knew everyone. And wherever I went, Gerard was there. You know, he looked after everyone as far as I could see. But his job was to get stories squashed and attack papers. You know, and it was a big. Going on my designer stubble. It was a big deal because the papers were kingmakers then. You know, they king and queen makers. They were. You didn't have social media. You didn't have Twitter. You didn't have any of these things. They could make or break you. So you kind of like had to play ball with the papers. So after many weeks of discussing things with Gerard up a mountain and paying him loads of money, which I didn't realise I was, but anyway, we went with News of the World, I think. Yes. Yeah, and it was a big old hoo-ha. Yeah. And really kind of like, it was quite kind of like annoyed about the whole thing, you know? I was like, this is so pointless. Just the whole thing I just thought was just, you know, there were people dying, you know, of famine and, you know, in awful situations around the world. And I had to sort of like have to deal with this nonsense.
But did it also feel quite out of your control?
No, because I think we did manage to run the narrative because I had a good team, you know, and a great manager. He didn't care. He was like, yeah, go for it. You know, he didn't try and stop me or change me. And I suppose it was a big thing. And I walked out of my flat and it was like that scene in Notting Hill when everyone, you know, they have all their you know, when Julia Roberts walks out and, not that I'm Julia Roberts, and everyone has their step ladders. And, you know, I mean, there was about 30 photographers with step ladders all set up around my flat. And it was quite scary. It was quite scary. And I remember I did feel quite vulnerable. I had a panic attack in the frozen food aisle in Tesco's. I know, yeah, not to be recommended. But I felt unsafe.
Yeah.
I remember looking down and seeing the cover of the paper, and I thought, and I did feel vulnerable. And I was vulnerable. You know, people did shout out horrible things, you know.
I mean, that was the start of the fame. It was the start of things to come. I wonder, who were the people around you at that time that you relied on, who perhaps didn't try to keep your feet on the ground?
Well, it was all my uni friends. We just carried on going to free parties, you know, and I can't remember, and I suppose in part maybe this is an age thing, so maybe we would have more serious conversations about it. But I don't remember having sort of deep conversations into the night, like, how are you okay? But then I don't remember not having those conversations. So I must have felt supported. And I think we just focused on having a laugh. You know, I don't think I really wanted to sit there and stress about the papers and, yeah. I think maybe there were times when they would have seen me homophobically abused, and that wasn't nice. But that was just sort of, I mean, it would be so different now. You
In
know,
what way?
well, just one, the outrage that someone might even say something like the kind of stuff they used to say.
Oh, I see. In the
You know,
homophobic type.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I
yeah.
think probably me as much as my friends and society would feel that we have recourse to sort of be outraged, whereas we didn't at the time.
You talk in the book about a slow unravelling.
Yes. What of my mental health?
Mm.
Well, yes. I mean, I had a breakdown. I wouldn't recommend that, although you do get attention. Yeah, I had a breakdown, and I remember realizing that I was having a breakdown, and then thinking, wow, I've heard tale of these things, because you hear, don't you? You think they had a breakdown, and you think, oh gosh, that must be awful, and then I was in it, and sort of slightly fascinated by it, and yeah, I reached a lot of my goals in life at quite a young age. And so I was very privileged in a way to realise that it didn't matter if you had a big house or, posh clothes or whatever it was, it doesn't really make you that happy. It makes things easier, but it doesn't make me happy. So then I had to sort of do quite a slow unravel, which turned into quite a quick unravel, and got very ill, very agoraphobic. I mean, I was, crippled by anxiety, depression, and PTSD from being at a very abusive boarding school. I found my prep school very abusive, and I that was all repressed. I'd forgotten the whole thing, really, really had classic trauma, and then it all came flooding back, and I couldn't really run from it anymore. And so it's a weird sensation to have. Yeah, I did get very ill. I got through it, luckily.
And particularly with group therapy, which you found
I love
really,
group
really
therapy.
useful. Yeah.
I think it's amazing. In fact, I think we should all have group therapy at least once a week. But this could be group therapy if you want it. You thought you were here just for a chat. Lady in the back row. No, but it's wonderful. I mean, it's terrifying.
Take us
It's
there.
such a shame that we're not allowed to sit in a safe space and actually be honest, which is why I spend a lot of my time being honest, in my job, because partly, one, I quite like flipping the script, because that's the type of person I am, and I think it just gives I can't bear the idea of this silly illusion that, everyone that's famous or doing these jobs, they're like, oh, aren't they wonderful? They're not. Most of them are assholes, that's one thing, and I'm sure you'll know that. And just because they do a great job, and just because I do a great job, does not mean I'm an amazing person, or that I'm having the best time. It doesn't. So I like to talk about it, but taking you there, group therapy, it has to be a safe space, and people are honest, and they go, today you could be feeling really happy, you could be feeling really dreadful. But what I realised is that I was never honest with my friends, like, I'm fine, or, oh, I'm just a bit stressed with work, or I'm just a bit tired, are the three signs to me that someone is not telling me the truth,
Glossing over it.
Glossing over it. And it's so sad that we don't feel that we can be emotionally open to the people who we should be the most emotionally open to. And it's also quite fucked up, really, if you think about it. But it's because, I learned very quickly that some friends, they're just not very good. I mean, they'd be mortified if they knew that I thought that. But, they're really not very good with emotions. So I just don't go there so much emotionally with them, as I do with others. And it tends to be the people that are either having therapy or they're not.
Yeah,
That's
and have
it.
that self-awareness.
Have that self-awareness so they're not so codependent that if I say, Because I don't need someone, if I say I'm feeling anxious today, to go, oh, that's bad. No, I don't need that. All I want is to be... I have a theory that we all need to be heard. I think that's the key. When we feel validated, and I've seen it in myself and I've seen it with others when I mentor them, is when someone gets validated and heard, they calm down in a second. And even it's like a little experiment for everyone here today. Just check in with that notion of what it actually feels like to be truly heard. Check in and see how it feels. You know, for me, it's because I wasn't heard for years and couldn't talk about anything. Not even consciously not talking, you know what I mean? It was so buried that it calms me down instantly. I love it. And so group therapy was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And also therapy in general is, I mean, it's really funny. This is the other thing about mental health. It doesn't have to be all like doom and gloom. I mean, you know, I had a breakdown. I ended up at a place where I worked through my gay shame, but I didn't go for that reason. And, you know, I was, whatever I was at the time, 38, doing something with Play-Doh that, you know, in art therapy. And I thought, what the fuck has happened to my life? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? With someone sort of shaking in the corner. I mean, I was around really ill people who I all adore. I adore all of them. Yeah, but I was like, what has happened? And someone going, do you want to do that with Play-Doh? It's like, fuck off. I'm a pop star. I don't do it with fucking Play-Doh. You know, it's like, what has happened? Like, wow, I don't know how I got here. Yeah. I don't know how I've gone from a number one album to thinking, is the Play-Doh poisonous? Shall I just kill myself with Play-Doh right now? You know, so I didn't. Don't worry. And my final spoiler alert, I'm still alive. My final art piece that I left was a experiential compost art. What do they call it? Installation piece, which apparently they still talk about to this day. Yeah. I mean, any therapist looking at that would have thought this man should not be leaving this place.
Risk factor.
But I was out of there.
Let's get the microphones out, and if you've got a question for, we'll pop up your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. There's one just here. Keep your hand up if you would, and just wait until the mics come. Is there somebody over here that we can get a microphone to next? Perhaps who's got a question? That's great.
I can't even see.
It's cinema lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. I think it would have been Homo sapiens, you were one of the first people I ever heard talk about the way that trauma is stored in the body. And I wondered, I found it so interesting ever since, if you could talk a little bit about how you got into body work and what you found helpful.
And Homo sapiens is your podcast?
It was my podcast, yeah, but then I stopped because I wasn't enjoying it anymore. Yeah, but I'm about to do a new one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I meant to say that, but I just have on mental health.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that because it is one of my like slightly geeky subjects now. Trauma. Okay, so when an animal gets attacked, let's say I'm a gazelle. Oh, I'm going along. I'm a gazelle, and I get attacked by a lion. If I survive, I will shake off the trauma. So I will. You'll see this with all. I mean, this is just science. They shake it off, and they kind of go back to just grazing again. You know, we find it more difficult as humans to do that because we have a lot more complicated brains that sort of, you know, we find it harder to release trauma. So it is physically stored in our nervous system, and it's not. The trauma isn't completed. All trauma needs to be completed. The energy has to be completed. You need to find safety again to then let it dissipate. And I learned this, and it was astonishing. I learned this. I read a book called Waking the Tiger by Pete Levine, and blew my mind. And so started doing a lot of somatic body work. I mean, we actually do a lot with our bodies anyway. You know, we go dancing, because, can you still hear me, by the way? You can tell I'm having real problems with the Madonna mic. We go dancing, it's a release. We go and do exercise, it's a release. We laugh, it's a release. We cry, it's a release. We're so fixated on sorting the mind. It's my firm belief that the body drives the mind. And I get really annoyed with the concentration on, no, just change your thinking enough so you can change it. You can't change, in my belief. You can't change your thinking if you've got stored trauma that's constantly being triggered. It just hasn't been completed. So body-based treatment, whenever someone comes to me, and if they're really, really hyper-vigilant, hyper-anxious, which I was, I say, you need to immediately, if you can, go and have massage or acupuncture. Bring it back to the body. Bring it back to the body, because the mind just gets in the way. So, for example, if I'm having a day when I'm like, I really do think I need to live in Greece, I'll be like, I think so, and I'm thinking about it. It's on loop. I'm like, something's going on. Let's just take it back to the body. This thought is not useful to me at all. So, stored trauma and the release of that has transformed my life. I feel so much lighter. It's not easy. The work's not easy to do. And it should, in my opinion, be talked about a lot more and available a lot more.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Wave at us because it's quite dark looking out. Yeah, there's a question just here. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to know, where do you stand on people who stay in the closet because they're worried it's going to harm their career?
Well, I mean, it's not really up to me, you know, to make someone do something that they don't want to do. I have in the past felt annoyed about people who, and probably still can do actually, about people that don't talk about it maybe as much as I think it could be talked about, or don't talk about it at all. But then I have to sort of stop myself and think, well, I'm not living their life, so why am I so sort of cross about that? I outed someone once to their publicist, quite a famous person who I can't say, but I did it not thinking for a second that this American publicist, who didn't bat an eyelid when I said it to them, which I thought was amazing in itself, I thought they would just know, because the person everyone knew. Anyway, I bloody outed the person. They're fine. But
Were there any repercussions?
well, I wanted to have sex with the person, and that didn't happen after that. No, I know. I went up and I was like, great to see you. And then my friends were like, how did it go? I went, not as expected. I outed him. But yeah, those were the repercussions. It's right. I think it's up to them. I mean, I think maybe it's sad, you know, but it is up to them. But I do still sometimes in my head get a bit militant and think, oh, you're just a wimp, you know, you can't do it. But I have to practice a bit more.
You have to give them a copy of the book.
Well, yes, you're right. But, you know, everyone's different, aren't they?
Yeah, and you're right. You don't know what's going on in people's
Yeah,
lives.
as long as they're not, you know, as long as they're not damaging people, so sort of pretending to be one thing, and then, you know, then that's a different thing. And then I think they should be called out, definitely.
Other questions?
There was someone else that waved a hand.
Yes, there's a question down the front here, please. Hold on just a second. We'll get a microphone to you. There's no such thing as a trivial question.
We haven't heard it yet.
Something that's always not bothered me, but I've been interested in is I remember you from Pop Idol, and I didn't know you were gay, and you've said you were openly gay, but I remember you were asked, who would you like to take to tea?
Yes, I said the Queen.
You said the Queen, and
Yeah.
I thought, how odd, like, why would a young I think you were a dancer or something. Why would you want to take the Queen to tea?
Yes.
And it really bugged me forever until
Did
I
it?
found out
Well,
you were gay.
What a genius. Don't you think it was such a genius answer, though?
No,
Did you not?
no, because
The Queen.
I thought you was trying to hide gayness
No, I
by
wasn't.
that question. That's how I figured it out, and I just thought there could have been so many other things you could have said. Your mum or an icon, but you said the Queen.
But the Queen is an icon.
Yeah, but boring icon.
Well, boring to you.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
So it was a
pleased.
genuine answer.
No, but
okay.
I'm pleased that you. I mean, you've clearly held on to that for a long time. So I'm really, and I'm glad that you've purged it from yourself. But I tell you why I said the Queen, because if people talk about queens, so I mean drag queens, but it can be an affectionate term between gay people to say hello Queen, hello Queen. So because I knew that the journalists in the room knew I was gay, I chose the Queen because, one, it was the most sexually neutral. They couldn't read anything into the Queen. But I also used the term Queen because I knew. Well, I was just playing them at their own game. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I have been for tea with the Queen, and she wasn't boring. Yeah. Will tell her, and she will chop your head off.
You'll
Yeah.
text her.
Yeah. Well, imagine if I could text the Queen. That'd be amazing. Get on FaceTime. She probably does do FaceTime, doesn't she?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
she's probably got someone who holds it.
For her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a sense, Will, in this book, of course, that you've worked through so many things. Are you at peace now?
What, generally,
Well,
or with gay shame?
with gay shame certainly, but
Definitely.
more generally as well.
Yes, definitely gay shame. And I can give you a good example. I recently, when I was doing the last series that I did of the podcast Homo Sapiens, I was homophobically abused by a bus driver, and it triggered me for about half a day. And it was really interesting, but because I dealt with it, I could kind of do that awful therapy speak thing of observing it. The pain wasn't so visceral to the point that I just checked out, and the pain didn't stay with me for weeks, months on end. So that is one thing. In terms of, am I at peace overall, I would say that I've never been at a place, because of all the somatic work that I've done. Happiness is fleeting. It goes in and out. Contentment is a different thing. And in terms of being content and peaceful, yes, 100%. But I'm really fortunate that, one, I have the tenacity, and I don't know where that comes from, but I do. And I have the funds, which, that's a whole other thing. And I've managed to find therapists that work well for me, and I'm very, very fortunate. So I'm under no illusion, because lots of people don't get that opportunity, or maybe they just don't have the strength to do it, and certainly lots of people don't have the funds, and that's a major problem in this country. Our mental health services are just dire, really dire. Really, really, really. Not saying people aren't trying their hardest, but it's pretty dire.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed that firsthand, yeah.
And that is another conversation for another day.
Oh my gosh,
I
it
think
is.
We are out
That's
of
my next
time.
book.
There you go. Well, absolutely.
Yeah,
it is your
my
best
next
book.
documentary.
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? You have this stage in which you can write about these things, and whether you choose to do that or something else, it's wonderful to have had you here to talk about this.
Oh,
thank you so much to everybody for
Thank you.
coming.
Yes,
Good
thank
questions.
you to everyone.
Book signing downstairs. Will Young.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Need a wee.